Welcome everyone to US 2. This is our first unit on postbellum America, which is 1865 to 1900. And I will be walking you guys through these slides. Since the slides are numbered, that's how I want you to organize your notes. And I will try to make the slides bigger for some of these images. So for the slide number 1, my main takeaway for you, I want you to note that the death toll was enormous. So I don't need for you to memorize the exact number of deaths, but I do want you to please put down for slide 1 that it was over 500,000, and those are countrymen killing other countrymen. So these are the mass graves that take us now. So for slide 2, trying to shock you because the first slide was the mass graves because there were so many deaths, but I want you to note for slide 2 that the causes of death were not just from battles. They fought on manured farm fields, right? So infection, amputations, no antiseptic, no anesthesia. So as long as you guys, the takeaway here is, germs and starvation, seen here with this prisoner of war victim, those were other causes of death. So that's part of the explanation for why we have over 500,000 Americans gone. So that was slide 2. So slide 3 is really just a time to pause and reflect, because our unit is about how we put the country back together. It's called Reconstruction. So here's a kind of bleak battlefield scene, and I would like you guys to just respond to this question for slide 3 and write down one of your ideas that you would give President Lincoln. Right? He's now in charge of this broken country. What's something you guys would recommend to put the pieces back together? So slide 4 is just some more detail about what the war did to our country. Look at Charleston, South Carolina. I've been to this city. It's beautiful. Now that looks like the ruins from Europe, from one of the world wars. So the big takeaway, guys, for slide 4 is that the Southern economy was collapsed, right? So things like railroads, gone, money worthless, and there were 4 million freed slaves who now were going to work. And how's farming going to work? So in this slide, make sure you guys are on slide 5 for your notes. This is interesting because many people, when they first look at this picture, think that these are the freed slaves, but these are white Southerners. This is the lower class. This is not the plantation owners. They have to start over. So big takeaway for slide 5, nice and short, guys, it's not just the freed slaves that have nothing. It's the lower class farmers as well. Okay, for slide 6, we looked at this in class, and I do want you guys to answer this. For slide 6, just put down one thing that you think is on their minds, right? They're gazing off into the distance, and what are they thinking about? Put down one caption for these free African Americans. So now, guys, we're going to go on to slide 7. So I do want you to put down for slide 7 that there's going to be a major shift for the labor. So no longer slavery, it's going to be sharecropping. So for this slide, number 8, the big takeaway I want you guys to put down is that Lincoln is very careful not to alienate or anger the South. Here's his quote down here: "No persecution, no bloody work." So my big takeaway for Lincoln for this slide is that he does not seek revenge, and he's trying to grant amnesty. Put that down, guys, for this slide. Amnesty is forgiveness. Because if a Southerner, is granted amnesty, they're basically saying, I'm sorry for the Civil War, and I'm now going to be loyal to the Union. Please let me back. Please forgive me. So that is Lincoln's main goal. I'm going to pause right now and get you started onto slide number 9. So let me make this big so you guys can see the photo from the newspaper. This is the Freedmen's Bureau. So guys, for number 9, this is an important term to jot down. It was part of the War Department, and their main job was to feed and clothe the war refugees, which were, again, the freed slaves and the poor whites. So they distributed 30,000 meals a day to prevent starvation. They also, seen here in this picture, helped freed slaves find work. Remember, slaves were illiterate. They were not allowed to read or write. So like labor contracts could be negotiated. And if there were labor disputes, like he didn't work the amount of hours that I wanted him to, then there could be a resolution. So Freedmen's Bureau had quite a big responsibility. So I'm going to put down, guys, for slide 10, that here's a positive for African Americans in education. So Freedmen's Bureau built these schools pictured here in the South. They brought teachers down from the North, and they also established colleges to train Black teachers. So moving in the right direction for African Americans. All right, guys, so this is one I definitely want you to pause. Let me go back. So for the Reconstruction amendments, guys, for slide 11, you need to write down what and this will be an important slide to make sure you pause and write down that there were 3 amendments passed at different times for different reasons, but put down 13, 14, and 15. And you don't need to write down the word for word definition from the Constitution, but the takeaway here for the 13th, this was done during the war, so that abolished slavery, made it illegal, and that helped, if you guys remember from the end of the year, it helped build the Union Army because slaves could run away from the South and join the Union Army. 14th Amendment is all about citizen rights. And I have pictured here the Bill of Rights, which you guys learned last year. And so this is passed to protect African Americans, especially in the courts. And then the 15th Amendment is massive and very revolutionary because it allows African Americans to vote. And this is done for a very special reason by the Republican Party, which we'll talk about. But as long as you guys know, this is voting, this is citizens, and this is no slavery. So let's just go on to slide number 12. And so remember, Lincoln is a Republican, and his plan was very kind and forgiving. The second plan, though, is from his own party made up of radical Republicans. So for this slide, I just want you guys to know that there was a huge disagreement. They did not like their president's plan. They thought it wasn't tough enough. They kind of wanted more punitive, or they wanted to punish the South. And so this is an example image to show you that to be readmitted to the Union, the Southern Confederate states had to actually go through quite a lot. They had a huge to-do list or checklist. So takeaway for 13 is that the radical Republicans had a vision for our country. So for 13, we're going to look at this image in detail, but this should show you that they were extreme in their views. They wanted to have a whole new South for these free African Americans. And a short takeaway, guys, for slide 14 is this is Charles Sumner here on the left. He's one of the leaders. And I don't know if you guys remember from last year, but leading up to the Civil War, he was the senator that was beaten to death for insulting the South, for having slavery as its mistress. So they're radical, they believe in political equality, and here's an image of their propaganda to try to persuade Americans before the Civil War to join their cause. So good old Charles Sumner, he got beaten with a cane, had traumatic brain injury for insulting the South, and now he's head of this new radical Republican Party. All right, guys, slide 15. Let me just walk you through these goals, and I'll tell you which ones to write down. So those radical Republicans, right, they're former abolitionists. They are all about punishing the South. So number one, they want to prevent the Confederacy from having any power. 2, they want the Republican Party to take over in the South, right? And they also want the federal government to get voting rights for these former slaves. All right, guys, so for slide 16, I want you to just put down the heading for 16, guys, why Republicans seek or need the black vote. And it's because now, guys, black votes can make a huge difference. Right? So before the war, the 4 million slaves did not count for the entire population, and that's because of the 3/5 compromise. That was back in your early US 1 days when we learned about our Constitution. And so now, guys, that slaves are free, the South would get, it's important to write down, guys, 15 more seats in the House from the freed slave vote. So the Republicans, guys, wanted to keep control of the House. You guys should know just from politics that if the Republicans have a majority in Congress, they can pass legislation to actually get their goals met. All right, moving on. 17. Guys, for slide 17, short and sweet, is everything changes when Lincoln is assassinated. So pictured here in one of the early sketches, he gave a speech about black voting rights, and then a few days later, it went to Ford's theater and was assassinated. So his new president, I want you guys to write down, is a Southern Democrat. So completely different views. And his name, make sure you guys put down, is Andrew Johnson. All right, guys. So for 18, I want you to note that President Johnson had a huge difference between Lincoln and even the Republicans' plan. So the third plan I want you guys to know is called the Restoration Program, noted here. And he is trying to pardon citizens who took an oath. People had to give back property, right? So the plantation owners had to give back. Look at this lovely plantation. He was targeting the planter elite. He blamed them for the war, and he made them apply for individual pardons. So citizens, right, could get forgiven, but if you were a plantation owner, you had to do an individual meeting. He was obviously against having the former Confederacy in his new government, but he was a balanced figure at this time in our country because during the Civil War, guys, he had remained loyal to the Union. Coming from Tennessee, that's time for me to sign off. This is Miss Tevis-Finn. Make sure you guys write down that he was popular in the North because of his loyalty to Tennessee, and make sure you guys have Restoration Program. So there's 3 different approaches, right? We have Lincoln's, then he's assassinated. We have the Republicans, and we have Johnson's. Signing off.